Chris?
Hey, wait. Let's clean it up. What?
Look at that. Let me get, no, I want to show the conference room. When I show the
Hey, Pete. Oh, who's talking? Wayne had to leave his baby goat at home, so
they had to bring my little puppy.
holy cow, it's a young one. Yeah, it's a pup. Pretty cute, eh?
What kind of?
It's one of those ones you
is it quite a bit of work to get it set up to be able to do this stuff? Yeah.
For Ottawa, that's huge. Big setup.
Yeah. Ron speaking. Hey, Steve. I am. Yeah, are we ready to go? Chris, as far as the technology goes?
The technology is ready to go. They have to turn their sound on.
Yeah, technology, we're good to go. Chris went to go do
Steve Mayer.
yeah.
Yeah.
I just have him as AV Steve.
AV Steve.
Too many Steves. Yeah. Like 4 of them.
Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Scott Anderson. I'm the Executive Director of Communications, Marketing, and External Relations and Man-Made Disasters at Algonquin College. And I'm going to be your MC today. I want to welcome our colleagues in Perth and Pembroke. Thank you for joining us on this, our last town hall of 2018. We'll just wait for the latecomers to sit down. And I apologize in advance for having my back to some folks. I'll try and do the occasional pirouette to make sure I'm not doing that constantly. So today we're going to have quite a few presentations, starting with Todd. And then we'll have questions after each one. Just a reminder that this meeting is conducted with our core values of caring, learning, integrity, and respect. And we'll ask that everyone ask just one question so as many as possible get a turn. We have mic runners who will bring a microphone to you, so please wait for the mic as our colleagues in Perth and Pembroke need to hear what you're saying. And the event is being web streamed. Online folks can submit their questions by clicking on the little speech bubble in the bottom of your screen. And where is Christine? I don't know where she is, but she'll be handling that. And we also have real-time communication with our Perth and Pembroke folks. So if you have a question, just raise your hand and we'll get to you as soon as we can. So with no further ado, I reach into my pocket for the clicker and invite Cheryl Jensen. Oh, I invite Ron McCluster to open the event for us. Sorry.
Segu Agwegu, folks. Can you hear me okay? So I think this is my first remote opening, but I guess just to thank everybody, of course, for coming out, not only today, but also yesterday for those of you who were able to join us as we did a fairly significant Indigenous event where we provided names for the spaces that recognized the community members from the Algonquin Nations, as well as those folks here and there in Ottawa and the rest of Algonquin College who contributed to our thinking. So with that, we acknowledge, of course, creation, each other, Mother Earth, all of the different pieces of creation, and acknowledge our connection to them. We do this in order to bring our minds together as one as we continue to do work for the good of our community. So with that, I think we can consider our meeting open.
Thank you, Ron. I'll now ask Cheryl to say a few introductory remarks.
Well, hello everyone, and welcome to this town hall in this beautiful space. You know, I'm still not over the fact that we've got Michelle Valberg's beautiful pictures up in this room and how it changes the look of this room and the feel of this room, and you can feel the spirit of every one of those pictures. I still look at that one of the spirit bear and think, man, oh man, I think my job is tough. She's out there taking photographs of, like, that's like a white grizzly bear. I could not do that. So it's a beautiful space and a great space to be here. And I see lots of workday shirts. Why didn't I get one with that pattern on the front? I got it on the back. I was checking Laura. I thought maybe she had hers on backwards, but anyway, I'm happy with my shirt. I'm happy with the event. So, welcome everyone. This is our chance to talk a little bit about what's been going on over the fall term, and to give you an update on some of the activities, but also to have an opportunity to ask questions of me and the rest of the team about anything you like at the end of it. So, but this isn't our last gathering. Next week I'm coming to Perth and Pembroke and here to have a Christmas coffee and cookie break, so make sure you've got those in your calendar so I can wish you happy holidays. I think that's next week. Yeah, that's next week, Monday and Tuesday. So, without further ado, what am I doing? Pardon? Next slide. Okay, thank you. Okay, so a few things that I'm going to talk about before we get into a summary of the board meeting from yesterday. You may recall that about, I think it was in June, the June town hall, and I was in Perth, I believe, and I sort of mused about what people would think about some sort of a voluntary retirement incentive package. And I did get some feedback from people who said that they would be interested to see what that might look like. And so I want to talk about that a little bit today. And I want to thank Diane and the HR team for helping me with this and seeing what this might look like in terms of something that might be attractive to people. I want to stress that this is a voluntary retirement incentive. And we're directing it at this time to folks who already are eligible for full pension. Okay, so I know, rats, everybody goes. I saw that reaction. I can remember when I was a young woman and there was, at my last college, somebody said something about an early retirement, and there were numbers like 2040 being sent out, and I said, well, if you do 40 minus 20, I'm out of here. They didn't think that was very funny. So this one is a small target for us, and every manager either has or is going to get in the next day their folks who are in this category. And so the way we've designed this is up to 6 months salary based on how long you've been with the college. And it's available to all full-time employees, regardless of the category that you're in, whether it's academic, support staff, or admin. And what we're going to do tomorrow is HR is going to send out a college-wide memo about this, so everybody will know what it looks like. And then that will give you some time. I know we do make fun of this, but retirement is a big decision, and it's something that you shouldn't do lightly. And so we thought if you have the package over the Christmas holidays, it gives you time to talk about it with your family and see if it's really the right thing for you, and whether or not you want to take advantage of it at this time. So think about it if you're in this category over the Christmas holidays, and then we'll have some dates in the package as to when we need to hear from you, whether or not you're interested in this package. Okay, so that's one thing I wanted to make sure everybody knows. Of course, and it will say this in the note as well, if you don't fit into this category but you want to talk to HR about a retirement package, you're free to do that at any time. It won't be with this incentive, but you know, that's always your option. And this one is not tied to the Employment Standards Act. This one is an offer to you. And so this means that it gives your manager an opportunity, as we talk about the dates that this will be effective, to look at replacing you in that position and how best to do that. Okay, so it's not an ESA. This is not an ESA incentive. Any questions on that before I move on? Jeremy.
For those of us that may have an employee who, let's say, in the last 2 weeks announced their retirement, and are going to see this and say, ooh, should I have waited 10 days? Is there a period of inclusion for that group?
HR will be looking at each one of those. We're certainly not meaning to disadvantage anybody with this. Okay? I'm sure you'll have more questions as you see the package, and please feel free to contact either HR or your manager on that. Okay, so I think that's some good news. It's something that I've been thinking about for a bit, and I'm actually glad it's not tied to the ESA, because it takes pressure off everybody, and you can think about it as an opportunity rather than a pressure. Okay? Next slide, Scott.
Is our video.
Okay, so this is a video of, we put this together for our board for our holiday dinner about a week or so ago, and this is just a few highlights of the year. You know, we all get busy with what we're doing every day, and it's, I think, a nice idea to reflect on all of the accomplishments we've had over the past year, and that each and every one of you have had a piece of, and certainly a role in. So let's watch this, and I hope it brings a couple of smiles. Roll the film. Okay. pretty good year, I would say. Could you see that in Perth and Pembroke? It's good? Yay, good. Okay, one more update from me, and that's on our Smoke-Free Campus initiative. So as you may recall, we put in an interim smoke-free policy on October 15th of this year, and that was largely to be in line with the legalization of cannabis and the announcement from our premier that you could smoke marijuana anywhere where you could smoke cigarettes. That hastened our discussions and our thoughts around smoke-free campus, which really we were looking for an end of this academic year as the date for that. But we accelerated that. That launched some consultations on what the full policies should look like. We're aiming for a smoke-free campus with a policy in place by the beginning of next year, which is now only a couple of weeks away. So we did some consultation. We had an online survey that was open for a few weeks, for 3 weeks, and you can see the numbers there. Lots of comments, over close to 4,000 comments actually. And then Brent did a Let's Talk About It. I thought that was pretty cute. A discussion at the residence on the Ottawa campus on the smoke-free policy and the new cannabis laws. We had a forum last Friday with some additional comments, and we're still looking. Of course, we have the website open if you want to give additional comments or questions as well. And so if you take a look at everything all in with our comments that we received on the question whether or not it was important for us to pursue a smoke-free campus, and I've said on just about every interview that I've had, it's split. So we're looking at, with all in, about 51% saying no and 49% saying yes. So our plan is to go ahead with a smoke-free campus starting in January, with some discussion over the next couple of weeks that came out of the consultation on what I would call some concessions or some compromise, particularly for the students. What was the percentage on that, Scott, from students and staff?
79% students, 21% staff.
Okay, so nice, healthy, I think, percentage for our students, and certainly our staff gave us good comments. And I receive individual letters and emails fairly frequently as well on this topic. Okay, so more to come, and we're working really hard with the committee on that implementation in a couple of weeks. Any questions on that before I turn it over to Doug? Any questions at Perth and Pembroke? No? Okay. Thanks, everybody. And am I doing the direct handoff? Doug Weatherspoon for Workday.
Good afternoon, everybody. And for all of those of you dressed in blue, you look fantastic today. Just fantastic. I think it's blue anyway. I've been told. So I'm just going to provide you a short update on Workday. As you all know, we provide the Board of Governors and the Audit and Risk Management Committee an update at every single meeting, and so this is what we told them. We are near the end of our journey before going live. There's not much more room on that work back chart, and so we are now in our live tenant, adding data to it to make sure we can flip the switch on December 17th for IT, or for finance and for HR. They get it a few weeks before you all get it. And so we're really thrilled to be at this stage. Next slide. As we report to the budget, we're on this phase of the implementation tracking well below our budget. And anticipate to have a surplus at the end of the effort. We are in the midst. How many of you have been to Workday training in this room? There we go. Good percentage of folks. So we are training managers, timekeepers, and field accountants. And there have been two parts to that training. The first was largely an introduction to the Workday environment, and the second was let's get your hands dirty, get your hands on the gear, start actually test driving the effort. That's what we call part 2 of that session. And we track everybody's satisfaction with that training and how comfortable they feel. So our current numbers, actually, just as of a few minutes ago, 85% of folks answered that they totally agree or somewhat agree that they feel confident they'll be able to use the workday to complete their job-related duties. And 93% now feel that, again, totally agree or somewhat agree with, I know how to obtain additional support. So that still leaves a little bit of work to do to make sure that everybody is 100% comfortable, and I'll talk about that in just a sec. Most of you, if you haven't already, started to receive Workday communications. It's going to ramp up between now and the holiday. Just letting you know as we go. In fact, we're grateful that Canada Post is back to work because we have a postcard that's going out to every part-time employee at the college that they'll receive at home, because oftentimes it's a little bit more challenging to communicate with part-time folks than it is with full-time folks. So we've really thought all through the gambit of communication, both in person as well as digital and the old-fashioned mail side, with the tracking towards January 7th as the date that you all will get access to it if you're not in finance or HR. Moving beyond that, though, we want to make sure that everybody has support, because one of the things that an old CIO told me is that people don't know what they want until they see it, and as soon as they see it, they're going to want to change it. So, anticipating that while you might have been paying attention, you're really going to pay attention when you actually have access to the environment. And so for that, what we have are demonstration sessions that we'll be offering at Perth, Pembroke, and here at Ottawa. And here in Ottawa, it'll be at the Employee Learning Exchange. We'll also have drop-in hours. So if you just want to come and do something, stop in. If you haven't met Chip or Denis, they're fantastic at doing this training. You'll also be able to log a ticket in the traditional way that you log a ticket by either calling the ITS help desk or sending an email to 555@algonquincollege.com. Or we also have web forms that you'll be able to do very specific tasks and send those on either MyEC or on the Workday website. And then finally, this is an easy-to-use solution. So the real change is going to be your ability to do a whole bunch of work that previously you would have had to have asked somebody else to do. For that, there are a series of videos, user guides that take you through, I think it's about 100 different activities that you might want to do. You want to change your bank account. You want to split your pay so that it goes to a different account, some of it going to a holiday account, for example. You want to add a beneficiary. You've changed name. You have gotten married. You want to go on vacation. You want to submit. All those things are now done via the self-service side of the equation. The folks that you should be looking to for help in the event that you have any help are the managers, the field accountants, and the timekeepers. They've gone through this training session, and they are there, many of them wearing their shirts today, to support the entire community. So ask for help. If you get stuck at any moment in the learning by doing, just ask for help. Raise a hand, either digitally or in person, and we'll be there. Welcome to Workday, January 7th, 2019. Be delighted to answer any questions that folks might have. If not now, January 7th. Anybody? Perth, Pembroke?
No, we're good.
Seeing none? Who do I pass it on to? Ron?
Ron's in Perth. So Ron McCluster is going to walk us through his Transforming Indigenization Initiative.
I'm not sure if folks could see, but Dean Hahn had a question. He was wondering what Workday is.
Not true, no.
No, not true. No, not at all. Transforming Indigenization Initiatives. Very excited to let the community, yesterday the Board of Governors, and now folks who are either in the room or watching online, that we have completed approximately 2 years worth of work that is based on primary and secondary research. We've looked at 43 different post-secondary institutions over 5 provinces. We have a very comprehensive understanding of current practices relative to that environmental scan, promising practices, excuse me. We have also concluded primary and secondary research here at the college. We did a very deep dive. I'm sure many of you have participated in that with our consultant, Yves Pelletier. We worked with the Board of Governors, the executive, ACLT, departments, individuals, groups of folks, faculties, classrooms, community members. We literally talked to as many folks as we could to help us understand what kind of activities are working at the college, what kind of activities we had committed to, what activities we were successful on, what kind of activities were outstanding. That was done not from a judgment perspective, but really to understand our situation here in the Ottawa Valley. And that resulted in a number of recommendations that are potential areas of consideration for the next steps for indigenization at the college. What's really interesting about that, though, is we've decided we're not simply going to take that list as a laundry list or a to-do list and check them off over the course of 12, 24, or 36 months. Instead, we are going to consider those items, but we are really going to take a concerted effort at developing Indigenous ways of knowing, Indigenous cosmology, Indigenous knowledge, and embed that throughout our leadership group at the college. Over the next year, I'll take on a guiding, coaching role with the Algonquin College leadership team, and I'll remind folks that also includes the Algonquin College executive team. And we're going to explore the utility of Indigenous knowledge. We are going to embed that into our 21st century thinking, into a multiple variety of areas within the college. And so I'm very excited to propose a framework to that group next year in January. Early thinking is that we'll have 13 meetings, for instance, tied to the lunar cycle. 3 of those will be focused on the transmission and acquisition of traditional knowledge. We'll focus on governance, how we decide items. Anyway, all that to say, lots of thinking going into leadership development from an Indigenous perspective. The third item on this slide is titled the AC Way Partnership. So everybody knows that we're undergoing a lean management activity and, sorry, Skoda. We're undergoing lean management activity and we're really excited to be working with not only Doug's group, but also with Karen Ross, an executive coach, to really work towards looking at how we include the AC Way and enhance that through different pieces of Indigenous knowledge. The third part is I've titled Erecting the Tree, and that'll take a little bit more to explain. We're going to have a playback in January to the college, hopefully in the room that you folks are in Ottawa, where we explore these traditional concepts a little bit deeper. But the erecting the tree part is based on some traditional governance for the formation of democracy within the Haudenosaunee culture. And we'll be using that framework to put these higher level thinking items into action. So very exciting to have the folks from communities on campus yesterday, very diverse group, lots of support, a successful meeting with the Board of Governors yesterday, and really looking forward to continue to engaging with the college community as well as external community stakeholders as we continue to travel down this road of indigenization together. Happy to take any questions.
Any questions for Ron? I can assure everyone that no animals were hurt in the filming of that presentation.
Look, she stepped on him. He's fine.
I have one question, Ron. What kind of dog is it?
He's an emotional support dog. I work closely with Scott Anderson.
All right, moving on. Any questions for Ron at all? There'll be another chance at the end to ask questions. Okay, so now we'll move on to the moment that we've all been waiting for, the 5-year capital plan, second quarter financial projections, and budget assumptions from Dwayne McNair. I'm going to hand Dwayne the clicker because I don't think I can keep up.
Thank you very much. Yes, they always do this to me. I always follow Ron. It's a hard act to follow. Okay, so I will just share with you some of the presentations we shared with the board last night. The first one being our 5-year capital plan. So as part of our fiduciary responsibility, we have to ensure we set aside funds to reinvest in the college. And we have our 5-year capital investments categorized into these 4 areas. So maintenance for physical and technology. We set aside money to just replace what we have already. So when roofs leak, we have to replace them. IT infrastructure has to be renewed. The recurring development needs, so those are monies to enhance what we have. So that could be space adaptations, conversions of classrooms, developing new programs, initiatives, and opportunities. And then the next category are major capital projects. So things like the DARE district, the Indigenous Commons, the courtyard. There's about $86 million in major capital projects currently. And then we have those projects that aren't approved yet but are being investigated and developed. The investment cases are being prepared, those potential major capital projects. So right now we're working on developing the investment case for our new student information system to replace Genesis. Yes, that's an important one, as well as our Healthy Living and Education initiative. We're looking for an investment case and some funding to undertake that. And then just on the right, we share with the board how we plan to fund these projects. And there's a whole list of sources of funds, from capital grants, loans, our fundraising efforts. And then we categorize them based on the confidence that we'll realize those sources of funds by high assurance, moderate assurance, and low assurance. So that's just a quick summary of the plan that was shared with the board last night on that. Next, we had Grant present the second quarter financial projections. So just building off the first quarter financial projections, which was presented a month or 2 ago, we continue to project a positive bottom line for the end of this year. And it's about a $3 or $4 million increase than we last reported. So we're projecting a close to a $12 million surplus for the end of this fiscal year. As you know, we approved an annual budget with a $5.5 million deficit. There's basically 3 reasons why it's much improved. The first reason being our enrollment is much higher than we had budgeted, particularly our international enrollment. So international students pay premiums, and those revenues are much higher than we had anticipated. The second reason, we did refine the impact of the Employment Standards Act amendments that were put in place by the previous government. So the equal pay for equal work provisions and minimum wage going up, and all of those various amendments that we put in place. So we had originally estimated it would cost us $25 million. And now we know it's going to be about $10 million less, so about $15 million. So that's helping to improve our bottom line. And finally, we did receive a one-time grant from the ministry of about $4 million to help us improve student outcomes and quality for our programs. And then finally, we made a presentation on what the next 3 years look like financially. So these are the assumptions we're using to project our financial performance over the next few years. The top line is enrollment growth, and that's all in enrollment growth, so international and domestic. And that's the first factor, 10.1%. That's based off approved budget for 18-19. So and we've already realized about a 7% increase over our approved budget. So when you look at it, take away that 7%, we're really talking about a 2 to 3% increase over what our actual enrollment is projected to be this year. And then the next 2 years, 2.3, 2.4%. We expect much more modest enrollment growth. Our full-time tuition fees, we don't have a new policy on full-time tuition fees yet. We are assuming it will be the same as the previous policy at 3% increase. We operate now with a corridor funding model, and under that model, there is no increase in grant funding. So our grants are no longer tied to enrollment growth, so there's a 0% increase there. Of course, we'll honor our collective agreements for our salaries and benefits. Operating expenditures are generally in the 0% to 1.5% increases. Some expenditures will increase higher than that. And so we consult with the various departments to determine what's the right assumption for that. And then our net contribution for funded activities, so what's that margin that our revenues will produce after paying all the expenses? We're assuming 4% for the next year, and we're trying to grow that margin by a percentage point each year. And of course, strategic investment priorities that I went over with our 5-year capital plan. So next year, we're anticipating $44 million in expenditures. The year after, $68 million. That's the year that the bulk of the construction costs for the athletics recreation complex will be accomplished. And then the next year after that, it'll take a little bit of a decrease down to about $48 million. Any questions on the financials? Okay. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Thanks. Now we're going to ask Doug Witherspoon to speak briefly about the International Strategic Refresh.
Briefly. So if anybody is wondering, it's Skoden is Ron's dog's name. As Dwayne's already alluded to, this past year, we've seen an increase in international enrollments of in excess of 40, almost 45% this year over year. So that's having an impact on the college. And in 2014, we had our first draft at an international education strategy. And so under the board's guidance, they asked us to update that effort. And so that's what we're working towards with a view by the end of the fiscal year to complete that work. The board gave us some directions. I won't go into all of them. But essentially, the primary one was this idea of internationalizing the college. Not it being strictly the responsibility of the International Education Center or the few programs that have large numbers of international students. Those days are kind of gone. Every program of study, every campus has large numbers of international students now. And so that direction, through that direction, we use the college's model for developing strategy documents called Playing to Win, and put together a working group and an advisory committee. So the next slide just gives you a sense of those participants, strong support from faculty, from support staff, from our Students Association, who are actively engaged in the support of international students. Just some high-level findings. So I know it says on that slide, from 2010 to 2017, the Canadian international student percentage grew by 119%. To put that into context, at Algonquin, we grew by 192%. And if we factor in 2018, 17-18, we're at 300% year over year, dramatically changing. By the end of this year, we'll be at approximately 20% of our student population being international students. In some colleges, that number is at 50 or 55%. One of the things that we're looking to talk about at the college is what's the right percentage for Algonquin College. And that's one of the things that we'll hopefully address in our new international strategy. One of the biggest issues, in addition to, as most people know, as Dwayne alluded to, financial sustainability, is the idea of mobility. Canadians, on average, university and college students, about 2% of us travel overseas to either do a work term or study abroad. In Germany, that number is around 30%, and in Australia, 50%. So Canadians need to get out and actually see the world. And because you come back changed. Any faculty in this room or support staff that have gone overseas to do some work, I guarantee you they come back changed as a result. So those are some of the issues that we're going to be addressing. And we have put together, or the advisory committee has put together a first draft of that. I'm not going to go into detail. It'll be up on the website and on MyAC, and we're going to be looking for your feedback on this very first draft of the effort. To get that, when you come back in January, we have a series of town halls planned at all 3 of our campus to talk a little bit about that. And then we'll also be running a series of tests as the Playing to Win model requires us. For this, what needs to be true for this international strategy to be lived? Do we have the resources? Do we have the engagement of folks? Do we have the right program mix? All of those issues will be addressed with a view of taking it to the board in the spring. So that's where we're at. I just want to give a shout out to Ernest and his team and to all of you who are really embracing a new student population. And I just cannot thank you enough. This is their second home, and as I think we've all said, they really are superheroes. When they pick up and leave their country, their climate, their culture, their friends and family, and come and land, especially those that land in January, in Ottawa to advance their career. We all want the same thing, and it's kind of neat and really a privilege for them to have chosen Algonquin College. Thanks. Any questions?
Hello. So most people can tell from my voice that I am not from here originally myself. Yeah, exactly. A little further swimming than that. But I think internationalization's an amazing thing and extremely important for an increasingly diverse student population. Can you give any indication about professional development opportunities that might be provided in order to help train staff to better work within these environments and adapt to these new environments?
Yeah, great question. So as part of the effort, again, when you're moving from 5-6% to now 20 and perhaps higher, you're going to run into, everybody is going to run into an international student almost every day. I would just pause to think that the same issues that affect international students also impact new Canadians and those that are oftentimes first time in their family coming into a post-secondary. So we're not just talking about issues of international students when we're talking about support. Again, one of the big changes I think of this strategy is how do we go about as a college supporting it. Traditionally, we've done that through the International Education Center, and when you're talking at this scale, that's not going to be good enough. This year, through the support of the Academic Development Group, we have hired a support person, our first support person for faculty in helping them understand, develop curriculum, but one person is not in a C, is just one person. So this plan hopefully will address that. It'll address it in a couple of ways. One, what are the right supports that we need to require, and how do we go about not having that delivered just through the International Education Center, but by everybody? What is the training that's required? And in that, you'll see measures around not simply whether or not the training is available, but whether or not people think the training is effective. The other way it's going to address it is that we have traditionally kind of given three folks money from international activity. The International Education Center runs as a business, and I will say has lowered their cost of operating each of the last 5 years by almost 2% per year. So improved efficiencies in the way we operate. The other way is that we provide monies back to the academic unit, largely as a way of paying back to the academic units, much like you would if you were receiving tuition from a Canadian student. And then the last way is that it goes into general coffers so that we can use it for other investments, strategic investment priorities. One of the things that we'll be discussing in the plan is how to go about thinking of a different financial model in which all units of the college, especially those that have a significant impact, receive the funding that supports their needs, not simply the academic and the International Education Center. So, I think we address that in the plan. We'd love your feedback on that. We'd love everybody's feedback. because this really is about internationalizing Algonquin College rather than just serving international students through a single office. And that's the big shift in this thinking as we also grow student mobility and try and get more Canadians to actually have an international experience as well. So not all the details, but I think we're headed in that direction.
Doug, this is impressive numbers that we're seeing for international. It's basically skyrocketing. What is there in the strategic plan, if any, for individuals, for international students who get here, find themselves struggling academically, find that they haven't been put in, they haven't been recruited into the right program? Don't know if you're aware of the Niagara College situation going on right now, where there's 300 students there. Half of them got into the college, nobody knows why or how, from India. This has to be a fallout of incredible growth. You grow like this, you're going to grow up and have problems that go with growth. We've seen it with English skills. Writing skills. There is to me, in my limited experience, there has been a disconnect, a chasm between what the students there are expecting in the way of what they're expected to deliver over here. Then they come here, realize they're way over their heads. This is something we need, I think, to address now, immediately. Parallel with that is the Algonquin College Food Cupboard has been a facility for students for many years. This year, its biggest intake was from international students. Why do we have international students having to go to the food cupboard? There's got to be a problem there. Who's going to fix that? Is that you?
Sure. Well, that's us. So just a couple of thoughts. Great points, Joe. And this is the type of transition that we have to make as a college from categorizing them as international students to just simply understanding that they're Algonquin College students. Oftentimes, one of the biggest challenges that we've had in the unit is folks will think they're international. And when they actually come to us, they're not actually international. They're Canadians. They might be new Canadians, but they're Canadians. And so we do have to shift our thinking and make sure, and this is what we hope the new plan will address, is that we think about it as a college support system rather than just international. So let me address Niagara. So Niagara uses a different model for testing English than we do. We're a IELTS certified accreditor. And so we believe that the systems that we have in place around English capacity are different than the ones that are being used at Niagara. That being said, we want to learn, and in fact, Ernest was at a Heads of International meeting yesterday to understand where there may be similarities, if there are any. Just to remind people that international students have a higher retention rate and graduation rate than Canadian students. So while there may be individual situations that Joe, I'm sure, is facing, just again, let's use data to understand the reality that most international students, not all, but most, actually have a higher success rate than Canadian students at this particular moment in time. That doesn't mean it'll last forever, and the point difference is not huge, but it's significant. So we really need to make sure that we understand that international students are not unlike everybody else. The myth that they are all wealthy, that they all come from well-off backgrounds, no, not all of them. Some of them are, but not all of them. They have as much need for the food cupboard as a Canadian student, and in some cases probably even more so because they're so far away from home. So really what we have to do is make sure that as we're accepting the dollars in from a revenue perspective, that we're also investing the money in the support systems to ensure their success. But we'll use data to kind of guide us. use emotion when we're talking about them firsthand, because these folks they oftentimes don't just need our support, they need our love, and we really need to get to that caring component. I'll just give you one other suggestion, and that is if you're not fluent in another language, go and sit in the middle of a conversation in another language. I don't know how many of you are partially fluent in French, but I sat through an AC or a lean huddle at the Montfort Hospital. And it just struck me as I picked up every second word that was the reality of our international students. And so going back to the previous one, we often have to slow down our delivery. We have to double check and really just make sure that we are investing in the support. So that we do have capacity to do, and that's what this new strategic plan is aiming to do. Cheryl, did you want to jump in?
Just a little bit on that. You know, Joe, I hear you loud and clear. I was a faculty member back in the early 90s, mid-90s, when these numbers were starting to come into Southern Ontario. You know, my colleagues at Centennial are the ones now that have probably about 55% of the students there are international, and I would gather, I would even dare to say that the majority of their remaining students are landed immigrants. It's a very diverse population in Scarborough. And I remember being a faculty member when our numbers were starting to really increase, not from India at that time, because students from India couldn't get visas to come to Canada. It was mostly China. And as a faculty member, one of the things that I'm sensitive to is that when numbers grow like this, sometimes we aren't catching up as quickly as we need to provide additional support for faculty members, because it's not just the PD, it's the volume of questions that you get and additional help that you want to give students. I know, Joe, you and I talk about this when you're eating your lunch looking out into the courtyard there, and I have an opportunity to talk to you. And so that's something that as we see our numbers, it's the international students largely that have, the international students and this $4 million from the province. I should stand up so people in Perth and Pembroke can see me. And I know Pembroke, we're seeing an increase in the number of international students, I would say from a more diverse background there. And Perth, we're looking at an intake of students from India for this spring, right, Ernest? And so, you know, every campus is going to have these opportunities, and I would say these challenges. So the international student increase that we've had is what's getting us out of our ESA challenge faster than what we expected, including some of the revisions in the numbers that we have. What we have to do now is invest that money back into the classroom and to the faculty and to different areas. I mean, the registrar's office is finding the same thing, right? So we have to figure out, and that's our job, that's the executive's job, is how to figure out to get that those resources to you as quickly and as wisely as we can. So I'm hearing you loud and clear. I've lived it. None of you want these students to come with their hopes and dreams and have them dashed because they didn't come with the right English test. How would they know? I would also argue the room we're in right now, and Ron, I hope will be nodding furiously, the other population that we need to make sure that we serve, that we have the largest, fastest growing number of Indigenous students in the province here at Algonquin. And their issues are not that different than an international student. They've left their home. They don't have family. English may not be their first language. It might be Cree or another language. And so I often say if we don't welcome these students, who will? We just have to make sure that everybody has the resources to make this happen. So we'll be working with you on that. We know that we've got the resources now. Dwayne and I have talked about this several times. It's just a matter of making sure that we are smart about it and get those resources to you in the right way. Thank you.
Any other questions? Oh, yeah.
I just want to follow up. Yeah. I just want to follow up on a couple of things you said there, Cheryl. As a faculty, full-time faculty member, I'm privileged to have PD built into my SWIF, and I have access to some excellent resources. That is not as easily or readily available for the overwhelming number of part-time staff who also have to deal with these situations. And I would say it's a double whammy for our part-time faculty to try to help anybody who is first-generation international student here at the college, because they have larger classes, they have so many other concerns, so many other stressors that are at play in their lives, that dealing with a student who doesn't understand the mechanics of submitting an assignment through yet another LMS is something that they don't have the time to be able to deal with that. They don't have office hours. Many of them will say, okay, I'm going to extend by 5 minutes so I can talk to you outside of class. But many of them share a space with many other part-time people. They don't have a dedicated desk. They don't have a private place to be able to provide that love and support that these students need. So again, I say with all due respect, as a full-time faculty, I have the tremendous luxury of an office where I can provide that support one-on-one when an international student, and I have had many who come in absolute tears. They're 18-year-old kids on the other side of the world from their parents and from their family, and at least we have Skype and Google Hangouts and other devices for them to connect with home these days. But a part-time faculty member, and we're looking at 75–80% in some of our departments of part-time faculty, that they don't have that support. So I would be very eager to hear the college's plan on providing support so that those and it's beyond part-time faculty, it's part-time staff, period, everywhere. How those people will have the same level of support that is being promised for full-time employees here at the college, so that we can make sure it's a welcoming learning environment for all of these students.
Yeah, so obviously I can't answer all of those points right now. I will say, when you said yet another LMS, one of the things I'm hearing from our students is that having one LMS that everybody is using is drastically improving their student experience. So I don't know if Patrick's here, but the work that Patrick and his team is doing and going from, I don't know, in some cases students were using 3 or 4 LMSs in their program, 6 or 8, and now they're on one. So thank you for recognizing Brightspace when you were talking there. Sure, we've got to make sure all of our employees feel that they're supported. I don't have the answers for how we do that now, and clearly there will be more onus on a full-time faculty member than there's going to be on a part-time faculty member for all the reasons you said. Just the way we have the same responsibilities, we're being careful with the responsibilities we give our part-time in the registrar's office, etc. But we need to work on that for sure. Thank you.
And we would love people's engagement at those town halls to throw ideas into the mix on how we go about doing that.
The question to the President, what is the current ratio of the full-time versus part-time employees, and do you anticipate the downward or upward trend in the future? Across the college, I don't mean any particular institute or department.
Thank you. I don't know that number. I'd ask Diane. I'm sure we can get that number for you. I'm not clear what you mean in terms of anticipated decrease in staffing or I'm not sure what, in staffing overall?
Mm-hmm.
We're growing, so I don't know how we would be declining in our numbers. In fact, that's what we're working on right now, is our staffing plans for next year with our budget. So I don't think anybody who's been involved in any workday has seen any decline in our work. It's just going to be better use of our time. So if you pay attention to what we will bring in February when we bring our budget to the board, we'll be giving you our numbers and our plans for staffing then.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Anybody else? Perth or Pembroke?
I don't think so.
All right.
We're good.
Over to you.
Thanks, Doug, and thanks everyone for that thoughtful discussion. I'd now like to ask Laura Stanborough to come and give us an update on the learner-driven plan.
Thank you. There you go. You could see Claude Brule and I are working on this project. Claude is out of town on business today, so he sends his regrets, but I'm happy to give a little update and answer any questions you may have about as we're doing our consultation for the learner-driven plan. If you know our goals, it's a very ambitious goal in this year's business plan, and the ambitious part is about the number of people we've wanted to talk to about this. You can't prepare a plan, a learner-driven plan, without talking to our learners, our students, and you can't do that without talking to our employees. I'm really pleased with the number of participants we've had so far. We don't have our thermometer up on the screen exactly as far as we'd like, but there's some very impressive numbers. And hopefully you read my AC, and if you do, I apologize. We've really monopolized it with LearnerDriven. I mean, if you don't know there were sessions going on and ways to connect and engaged, you know, then I guess you weren't reading my AC. But we're trying to get that out in everywhere on the screens. There's been opportunities at each campus, number of opportunities at each campus. There's been online opportunities for our students and our employees. So. And we've tried to personalize it. We've had faculty members seconded from their positions, full-time and part-time, in order to have smaller, more meaningful conversations with you. Because we know in groups like this, sometimes people aren't comfortable speaking up or having a say. So we've really tried to do this in as many ways as possible to enhance the experience. And the good news is, these are last week's results, and I think Lynn's here. Lynn Schumann, thank you, Lynn. Shout out to Lynn. She's the project manager on this. She's been leading some of these sessions as well. Valerie Hill as well. Rob, I'm not sure who's here. So there's a number of folks, but I don't think these numbers include. There was a session with over 100 folks in. That's next week. Okay, so there's still more sessions going on. And we have, you can see, about over 7,500 pieces of input from people in terms of individual comments. So, so we're very pleased with that. It's quality, and there is significant volume in terms of activity and input that we're getting. And it's not over yet. We will probably, with some of our external stakeholders, which I'll show you in a minute, go through maybe a little bit in January with those individuals. But if you haven't had an opportunity yet, and the website's excellent, lots of information there, lots of the feedback already there. We want to be very transparent in terms of the information we're gathering so far, but there is a link to a survey if you'd like to fill out some information there, so you still have time. Here's some of our external stakeholders. We do recognize our employers. These are where our graduates are going. It's very important to hear their input as well. Program Advisory Council, alumni, I mean, the list is quite significant. And we've done some other internal consultation as well. We've gone to College Academic Council. We'll be going back there again as well. And so we've really tried to be in departmental meetings and gather as much information. So our next step here is really going through all that data, because what we're trying to do is determine trends. What are people saying? If we're going to build a plan, we want to build a plan that resonates with our students and our employees. And pleased to say we're hiring student researchers to help us do that. So I think that's underway right now, and they'll be in place in January. So that's what's happening there. And from there, equally as important to gathering feedback is doing the playback. So that's what you'll be seeing next. And we have, it's not the easiest thing to read here. Lynn, are we gonna, do we have this up on the, will we have this up on the website so people can see it? Because it's really, I can't really read it as well myself here, so sorry about that. But what it does show you is the timeline from May up until next June. We will be presenting the plan in June to our Board of Governors. But we want to make sure we do all the assessment, gather the trends, do a number of playbacks with our stakeholders and with you, and then formulate the plan. So we don't want to rush this process. We've taken time to gather all of the information, and we can't rush it at the back end. We have to make sure we're as thorough at the back end as we were at the front end. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions you may have. Joe.
Thanks, Laura. I've looked at some of the comments online, and it seems to me they're all over the place. Like, people aren't just talking about the learner-driven plan. They're talking about an amalgam of a whole other pile of issues that go all the way from SWIFTs to workload to mental health to. So I'm wondering if you're going to be including all comments on your site so that we can see where people are coming from overall, or are you going to edit? Yeah. Let's say.
There's no editing there. It's all going up there, yeah. Unless it's offensive. I mean, unless it's highlighted, you know, whatever. But no, there's no. I want to be very transparent, and so that, you know. Yes, I agree with you. Some of them are just simply irritants for people, but you know, solving some of that lower hanging fruit is okay too, because if it's irritants, it's getting in the way of their learning, right? But we are looking for those higher level, and that's why the playback is going to be very important, because people interpreted the questions in different ways. They have their own way to express what personalization means to them. But I totally get what you're saying.
Okay, just to follow up to that.
Yep.
What's the end game? What is the goal for you and the college? What is it that you hope to crystallize out of the process and then hand it back to us to implement?
Yeah. Well, we're looking to develop a plan that would have 3 or 4 significant items that resonate with most, that would be meaningful as a personalized education. We want to be leaders in personalized education, personalized college experience in the province. And so we don't want a laundry list of to-dos. We want to see what would be meaningful for the majority of our learners, that would enhance their education in a personalized way. And that would be hopefully transformative for the organization. For how will we look different in 5 years to our learners and their experience? What that looks like now, I don't know, because we're still in the gathering process. But we're not looking for a big laundry list. We're looking for 3 or 4 meaningful items that will move us in the right direction. Okay, we'll talk. Okay, sure. Anytime, anytime. Any other questions? Pardon?
Anybody in Perth or Pembroke?
Not here. Nope. We're good.
Okay, I'll hand it back to you.
And just to back up what Laura said, thanks. We don't edit comments unless they're offensive or they talk about colleagues, or we did take a few out in a few spell check fails in the smoking website, folks who were either for or against banning Tabasco. So we didn't really want to bring that down. So I think we all saw the benefit a little earlier on of a dog in the workplace. So I want to take a few minutes and just talk about our therapy dog program. You'll all remember that last Bell Let's Talk Day, we announced that we would be bringing a therapy dog program to the college. And Ruth Dunley in communications, Ruth, where's Ruth? Stand up, Ruth. She loves it when I make her stand up. Has been leading a small team. Is there anyone else from the committee that's been helping Ruth in the room? Everybody stand up who's on this committee. This group has been working very, very hard and in what turned out to be a much more difficult task than we thought to bring therapy dogs into the college. But I'm happy to say that they've made progress. This is a program that is going to make people smile throughout the college, whether they're students or staff, and give people an opportunity to spend some time with a dog, folks who may not be able to at home. So Ruth and her team put out a call for applications, and we got 20 resumes almost 20 resumes from dogs. We made them describe themselves and their benefits and little pictures of them, and then our graphic artists have turned them into little emojis that you'll see throughout the college in the coming weeks. So these candidates have been brought forward, and we sent out. That's my dog lying down there on the side, Franklin, who's a rescue dog from the vet tech actually. The call went out for our student ambassadors, and we've hired 3 students who will be trained in some mental health techniques and counseling, and they'll go with the owners of these dogs, and you'll see them around the college. Training is going to get started in January. St. John Ambulance is going to certify each of these dogs as a therapy dog, and then they'll be free to roam the halls with their owner and student guide. So that one on the left is pretty cute. We're going to be rolling this out in January, so stay tuned for more details. And are there any questions about the therapy dogs?
For those people who submitted their dogs, I was one of them, my little bulldog. So when would we be expecting to see if they pass these tests?
Yeah. So Ruth told me I would be getting this question. So you'll be hearing from the committee this week on the next steps for your dog, and I think all the dogs that were submitted will be going through the training, and it'll be up to the St. John Ambulance folks to tell us whether they're suitable for this program or not.
Okay, great, thank you.
Thanks for the answer, Ruth. Any other questions?
Scott, if I could just add to this, this all sounds very cute, and people might be saying, don't we have bigger things on our agenda than pet therapy? There is so much evidence that shows that having pets on campus reduces stress, especially around times of exams. When we were at the Higher Education Summit a couple weeks ago, Georgian had a whole display of an applied research project that they are doing with pet therapy and dogs on campus. So I don't want you to worry about that this is taking money out of other things. This has largely been done by volunteer work. And I know it's going to have a positive effect on our campus. It's already happening in Pembroke. Is Jamie there? Jamie's already got a pet therapy program going. We do have, and I know some of you have already been involved with your dogs, we've had a pet therapy program that runs usually during exam week. So this is a good thing that's going to be just part of our strategy for the issues of mental health and stress reduction and harm reduction with our students and with our employees. It's I think Christine's here. And there's Godin, yes. Christine will agree that mental health has been one of our key concerns this year. See, you're not paying attention to me anymore. You're paying attention to the dog. So anyway, stay tuned. It will be a good thing for us here.
So who gets to follow this? Sure.
So, Scott, did you want to open it up to any other comments or questions? I thought that was the.
Yeah, we have a question here, Ron, that we're going to take first, and then we'll do that.
Perfect.
Okay. I completely understand the benefits of therapy dogs. I have a couple of them working around my life. But I am a little concerned, be it that we just finished talking about the making international students feel comfortable and the work we have to do around that. I'm wondering whether we've thought through how we would introduce this to some international students whose feeling about dogs is not as warm and cuddly as some of us. You know, for some people, I'm fully aware of the fact that, you know, they think dogs are unclean, and the idea of just being in the same room as a dog is a problem. So, like I said, I'm not throwing cold water on the idea because I get it, and I know the benefits of therapy dogs, but I also know that we have to think about the communication to students and international students in particular about the fact that this is happening, because I have had students run screaming from a room when I had a guide dog in the room. So we just have to think about that.
Thank you for that comment. I think that's very true, and we will have a internal college campaign on screens and posters in January talking about the therapy dog program, distinguishing therapy dogs from service dogs, because we will have animals at the college that you are allowed to stop and pet and talk to and get some stress relief, and there are other animals that you're not allowed to touch. And so we have to make sure that the college community is aware of that, and part of the training with the students and the owners will be about how we introduce these pets to the college community, where we take them, and how we talk to folks about what the purpose of this is. There aren't going to be many dogs in the halls at one time. It's going to be you'll see them occasionally. Thank you. Any other comments about therapy dogs before we turn it over for general discussion? Okay. Any comments about the town hall today, the format, or any of the presentations, or any topics that weren't covered that folks would like to raise? I don't know who's...
Hello. Sorry, I just had a question about the request for proposal that had gone out for health services, and I'm wondering if there's an update on that, and a particular question around the transition for students, because it is supposed to close April 1st, and we still have students up to April 30th.
Who would like to answer that question?
Thanks, Karen. It's a good question, though. The request for proposals has gone out, as most of you know. You may have seen it online, the information about that from the President. It's up on Merck's right now, which is the platform for such proposals. We have extended the deadline to give people more time to prepare a more fulsome proposal, and we expect by mid-January to have those here at the college, and by the end of January to have an outcome that we can announce. At that point, then, we will work with the new proponent to make sure there's a seamless transition. That will be part of the contracting phase as we get into February. But we are keenly aware that students will be on campus as we make that transition. but we're still confident we can make it for the 1st of April.
Thank you. Who's next? Sorry.
Hello. Again, I'm not sure who this question is for, but a policy seems to have gone in place this semester that limits partial load and sessional faculty members from doing anything other than teaching in a paid capacity at the college. There hasn't been a lot of clarity or transparency about this other than simply the policy being put in place, and a number of my colleagues, and myself included, have suddenly found we can't do a lot of the stuff we used to do. So the question is kind of threefold. Why is this happening? Is this going to be the new normal? And what happens to groups like Applied Research who have previously relied on full-time or partial load and sessional faculty to lead projects?
That was a great question. My name, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Diane McCutcheon. I'm the Vice President of Human Resources, so I'll take that question. For partial load faculty, there is a decision that's been made for partial loads to be able to only receive assignments for teaching. For part-time and sessional faculty, their access is status quo, so they could actually take on other types of assignments as well. But for partial loads, it'll be straight teaching. Well, okay. There's been a lot of jurisprudence in the last couple of months, basically back since March. St. Lawrence College received a decision through an arbitration about what defines certain types of work. Algonquin College also received one in May, and we then started to define, okay, what should be assigned to partial loads and what shouldn't be. And through those decisions, that the college arbitration decisions, that we've basically made these decisions here. That's why.
Thanks, Diane. I wanted to get back to Ron for a second because he had something to say before we finish with therapy dogs. Ron, did you have something to say?
Oh, no, not at all, Scott. I was just talking about the closing. That's all.
Okay, thank you. Other questions? Christine?
Hi, Diane. This is just a follow-up question because I'm getting these same questions from my part-time support staff who are also partial load faculty. I don't think there's been a communication that I've noticed anyway that's gone out. I'm wondering if the college plans to put out a communication officially about that, because I am getting a lot of questions from part-time support staff who happen to also be partial load faculty.
Sure. Thank you for that follow-up. So we have communicated at Chairs Council. We've sent out a communication to our chairs and deans and have asked for that cascading down, as they're the hiring managers.
Thanks, Diane. Joe? Sorry, could you use the microphone, Joe, so the folks at Pembroke...
Hopefully my voice is loud enough.
Not to get to Pembroke and Perth.
Can we flip the format of these town halls around and give the voices to the audience first, and then we have the business presentations after?
That's a good idea. We'll take that back and talk it through. Anyone else? We have a question back here. Thank you.
My turn. Hi. I understand that last night at the Board of Governors meeting that item 5 was transforming indigenization initiatives, and I was just wondering if it was approved.
Yeah, I can speak to that, Louise. Yes, it's been approved in concept from the Board of Governors. And now we're going to start a plan Ron's got a plan now to take it out to the community, to the college community, and start talking about the how we bring this to life. It's a very general, high-level plan. Mm-hmm. And so it's sort of like the questions that Joe had on the learner-driven plan. What actions do we put in place to make, and over what period of time? So very high level. It's online now, I think, Ron. It's certainly as part of the project, part of the board package, and we can share it widely now, I think. Do you want to add anything, Ron?
No, well, yeah, yes, actually. Just that one, very excited about, again, how the day went yesterday. We had a number of community members in from local Algonquin nations. Of course, we did the broader event where we did the naming, and then I had the Board of Governors meeting where I presented the indigenization strategy. The next step in January will be to do a number of community playbacks, the first of which will be there in Nawapin, where I'll walk folks through in detail of the research, the thinking, the influences, and arguably and most importantly, the next steps.
Thank you, Ron. Are there any other questions? Oh, Louise?
Yeah, thank you. I wanted to say that I'm really kind of excited about the Center for Truth and Reconciliation and the TRC calls to action and how that's going to be incorporated. I find that it's a really good initiative. I'm not quite sure if it's an initiative that is directed at the college community or if it's really going beyond the walls. And there's a few other things that are really quite exciting to me, like the definition of indigenization has not yet been presented, but I only had a quick read through this because I only saw it yesterday. So I have a lot of questions. I'm not quite sure what indigenous entrepreneurship is, but I have only one main concern right now. Has to do with the Mamodoussouan Center, and my understanding that it's going to become the center for, I guess, indigenization, I guess. But it sounds to me as though the core of the Mamodoussouan Center right now, or has been since the beginning, it's really been a place for students, indigenous students, to build community and welcome new members in, because not everybody that comes to Mamodoussouan Center is strictly indigenous. There are a lot of other people who are collaborators and friends and working to learn. So I'm concerned about if that is replaced by something else, where is the space for that community? Like, is it going to totally disappear? Because when I did my fast reading, I saw that a lot of the services for indigenous students that are offered in the Mamodoussouan Center, well, a lot of them have disappeared. And then there's this idea that the people who offered those services in the Mamodoussouan Center will be relocated to other areas where similar services are being offered. So I'm really concerned that this will have the perception of a return to old assimilative processes and approaches to education, where, you know, First Nation, Métis, Inuit input is not really apparent.
Ron, I would like you to address that.
Yeah, more than happy to respond. So first I'll say, if that's the biggest concern that you have, happy to tell you that's not happening. We have no plans to relocate staff. There's no plans to transform the Mamodoussouan into, the audio cut out, but into anything other than what it is. Of course, perhaps enhancing services, but if that's a concern, I hear you well, and I can let you know that it's a non-issue. What I will say, though, is that like any strategy, we need to continue to consult and engage with community members. And as I stated earlier, and Cheryl did as well, we will be doing that again in January and continue to do that ongoing.
Thank you, Ron. I have a couple questions that came in online before the event. And this one, I'm going to put you on the spot, Diane, sorry. When is the next, this is from a support staff worker, when is the next employee survey? I have lots to say.
That's great. Great question, and actually it kind of gives us a little bit of a lead into our next survey is going to be in November of 2019. So we're going to have basically a launch of a whole new, not a new communication, a re-communication plan of making sure that we're all remembering what happened in 2017 with our survey results and looking at some departmental initiatives again. So we'll be coming back to you in January with some of those plans, so stay tuned. But the answer to the question was November of 19.
Thanks, Diane. Yep. Was there a question over here?
I was really encouraged to hear that mental health is a priority for us in our community at Algonquin. I hear from our colleagues in the Center for Accessible Learning and counseling services that they're overloaded, right? They've got lots on their plates. What is the plan? What is the college's plan to better support our community through the Center for Accessible Learning, through counseling services? What's on the horizon there?
Laura,
Can I?
Ben?
Yeah, sure. We talked about that a little earlier in terms of when we're right now putting together our business plan and our budget and requests for positions through all our processes, and really looking at evidence-based metrics too in terms of how many students are coming our way. How are we able as an institution, we saw the budget presentation earlier, we're in a good news position in terms of our budget because of our increased enrollment. But what do those pressures mean for the departments that are serving that increased enrollment? So we're going through all of that right now. We meet with our teams individually. So I can tell you we're taking it very seriously. We're looking at that as we prepare our requests for resources for the coming year, for our next fiscal year. So, and that, we know changes in retroactive accommodations and those types of things, and that's also part of our plans, is how do we best also support our employees and particularly faculty with these changes that have come through. We're listening at College Academic Council in terms of what's being said there as constituents bring their concerns back, so we're listening loud and clear there. So, so you should expect to see we're making the movement we can, given that there's always, every area has things they want to build and do and better serve our students, and so I think that's common across the whole college. There's only so many new positions we can create in a year. Also, our core business is teaching, and so how do we balance all that in the right way? But we're very, very mindful, particularly in those services for our students and our most vulnerable students, and how can we support them in the best way we can? Does that answer your question? A little bit? Yeah. No, understood. We have to go through the process. I have nothing to announce right now. All I can tell you is it's on our mind and in our plans. How it all comes out at the end of the budget and business processes. We're not quite there yet. Okay.
I'll add a little bit more to that one as well. Just to say that this is an issue that comes up at the Committee of Presidents at every meeting. This is a provincial issue. It's not, as you know, located only in Ottawa and only at Algonquin. And so the position that we're taking with the province is that this is not something that can be solved institution to institution, but is a community issue. And we need to be able to use the resources within our communities and coordinate it so that we can all benefit from each other's experiences. We are lucky to have a representative on our Board of Governors who is a pediatric psychiatrist and gives us not only her sound Board of Governors guidance, but also some very good resources from the Ottawa Hospital, the Royal, and other locations within the city. But Laura's right. This is not an easy issue, and it's something not just for our students, but for our employees that we have to take seriously and address as a community. So, can't give you an exact answer today, but you should know that it's forefront on our discussions.
Thank you very much, Cheryl. Any other questions? We have plenty of time. Tracy McDougall, are there questions in Pembroke?
Nope, nothing yet.
Anything from Perth?
Okay in Perth.
We're good.
Any other comments here before we close? Well, I want to thank everybody for coming today. I think this was a great discussion, really good interaction, and lots of insightful comments. And so I'm going to ask Ron McCluster to close the meeting in a good way.
In the community that I come from, it's important that we do an opening and a closing. Unfortunately, I don't have the linguistic ability to offer you a closing in my language, but when we do the opening, what we do is we recognize each other, we place ourselves within creation, we recognize our Mother Earth, and we then build a ladder to Skyworld. One of my personal favorite elders, Tom Porter, talks about the need to place ourselves in our place within creation relative to this ladder to Skyworld. And so we always start at the bottom. We recognize Mother Earth and we recognize the two-leggeds, and then we continue on this ladder. We recognize, the rocks, the minerals, the insects, the crawlers, the fish, the swimmers, the bushes, the plants, the medicines, the animals, the trees, the flyers, the winds, the sun, the moon, the stars, all the different things within creation. And we acknowledge that each and every single one of them were given sacred instructions by our Creator. If there was no trees, we'd have no air to breathe. If the sun went out, we'd be too cold. If there was no water, we'd be too thirsty. And all those things continue to live to their sacred instructions. And so we acknowledge each and every one of them, and we give thanks to them. Sometimes, though, we as the two-leggeds have convinced ourselves that we are somehow different or more powerful. And so by giving this acknowledgement, we replace ourselves in relative relation to all of those things in creation. So we give thanks to all of those things, we acknowledge all of those things, and we continue to strive to remember our own sacred instructions. That's how we open stuff at home. At the end of that, there's another way of giving thanks in closing, and we remind ourselves of all of those things, but we also remind ourselves of the good work that we come together to do for the purposes of the community and to do those things in a good way. You heard a lot of stuff today. The Board of Governors heard a lot of stuff. I heard the package, if I remember correctly, was over 300 pages. And whether it's Workday or internationalization refresh or the learner-driven plan or the plans for indigenization, a lot of thinking, a lot of time, and a lot of effort goes into these things in order to do good work for the community in the best way that we can. So with that, I hope that you are enjoying, for those of you in Ottawa, a meeting in the new space outside and next to that courtyard. There are big, bright things ahead of us in our future. If we turn our attention to what's going on outside, the end of seasons is almost here. That's relative to some ceremonies at home. And the big blanket is coming, so the big sleep is coming, and it's time to rest. So as we get closer to this little bit of time off we get after the holidays, just to encourage folks to be thankful, to think about each other, and to get some of that real needed rest and spend time with your families and your communities. So well wishes to everybody. Good luck. Onogiwahe. Danita.
That's it, I guess. Okay.